Okay, this will be a challenging one. Okay. Wonder how big we're going to make it, or small. We're going to leave it on 100. I think this will look better in a negative mode somehow. This one's a little bit difficult. Looks a bit shitty in positive and needs something a bit more exotic. So I wonder how it's going to look. I'm going to add some contrast. And actually, when you're working in negative mode, we're doing something different now, I'm thinking. So the hue is the interesting one. Now what do I do there? No, we're not touching the hue, I've just decided. Sometimes I just make decisions at the last moment. It's really odd, but that's what I do. This one's going to be an interesting one to see if I can come up really creative. It's not the easiest thing to work with. There's not much colour in it. There's just a limited amount of colour, and let's see what it is. What we're doing is a Dettol bottle. That's navy blue almost, or deep blue, and that's green with a bit of yellow. So it doesn't leave, and then there's white. It doesn't leave much to be desired as when it comes to multiple colours, multicoloured sort of things. So we're going to try and make the best out of this anyway. See if I can, how should I put it, surprise myself by photocopying an empty Dettol bottle. Okay, let's see how this goes. Whoa, that looks interesting. But when you break the colours up, when the colours break up, they do add to the amount of colour. So I sort of forgot about that aspect of it. So now we're just going to make this into a mirror image, or maybe we can, we're thinking we're going to throw it on the recycle pile. We're going to use this. So it looks interesting. At least the blue came up yellow. So that looks really interesting. It's a lot better than I thought. So now we're just going to set up our copied paper. I'm just going to try and guess how. We're just going to leave it at 100. So this looks good even without being a mirror. So I'm wondering what we're going to do with this. So let's see if we can make this come up a treat even more colour wise. So now we've just got copied paper. And we're going to go here, and we're going to, first thing, remove that. We're going to leave that on. I'm wondering if a background colour might have been desirable. So now we're just going to switch ourselves to the middle. I wonder what we're going to do with the hue. If we're going to use the hue at all. We're not. We decided not to. Contrast. I'm going to pump it up. Okay, let's see what we can do with this reproduction of an empty Dettol bottle. I used to hate Dettol as a child because when I had wounds, my parents used to put it on and it used to sting. So I really, even though it's good for a wound, it just fucking hurt as a child. And as a child, you don't understand, so you sort of really hate the feeling of having that Dettol on your fucking open wound. Anyway, the bottles come out an interesting light greeny colour. It's quite interesting, and looks really good. So looks much better. Looks more exciting than the original print on the bottle. The colour scheme and all that. In my opinion, anyway. So let's see how this goes. But yeah, I used to remember this stuff as a child. It used to sting like mad on an open wound. But hey, we all know Dettol is good for open wounds. Of course, you can get other brands of this sort of thing. It's not just the same, but Dettol is basically I think you could call it an icon, an Australian icon. I don't know if it's actually Australian, but I think it's probably been sold to foreign interests, if I'm correct. I could be wrong, but most things tend to go offshore these days, which is really, really sad. Apparently something good happened to Vegemite. Apparently Vegemite, like most Australian icons, went offshore, and then an Australian company called Bega, if I'm correct, bought back Vegemite, and Vegemite's now back in our hands again, which is really nice to hear. I like a bit of Vegemite on my toast sometimes. Well, every time I have toast, pretty much it's Vegemite, but I do have other things like Wheat Bix, which is another Australian icon. I don't know whether they are still in Australian hands, and sometimes I have some Uncle Toby's oats, which I don't know if they're in Australian hands either. But, it'd be good if we had more things in our hands rather than sending it all overseas, like manufacturing, and these big companies just get so greedy. They don't care about us. They just want cheaper produce in countries like China, for example, where everyone seems to send their manufacturing regardless of whether they're Australian or US. It's really cheap labour, and it's like taking advantage of the Chinese for their cheap. They're willing to work for dirt, so to speak. And it's really sad that we can't have, these capitalists, they just want everything to be cheap, so they can save it, so they can make more, increase their profit margin, which is so wrong. If I was running a company that made photocopiers, I'm the kind of person who wants to make the entire photocopier, from the tiniest of components to every little piece of whatever component, everything, 100%, unreservedly, 100% of everything would be made and manufactured in Australia and processed in Australia, from the minerals up to the finished product. That's how I see it. That's what I'd like to do when I one day become CEO of a future photocopier company. I want to make the whole fucking machine, down to every chip, every component, every mechanical part, everything to be made and owned in Australia. Totally Australian product from start to finish. Gotta go.